Refugee Camp Part 3 in Zombies Past Clock Time 2. Extended version. This story is fictional, and has no relation to real events, nor to existing people. Any resemblance, with reality, is a put coincidence. Love, VYTCHS, science, fiction, and zombies. Unconsciousness, voracity, and brutality, define predators, corrupts, zombies. When I arrived a month ago, RHYNNA continued, security agents and some people in the gangs were constantly watching me, and the same is happening now with you, because they suspect of the rival corporations and want to know if you're a student of them. How did you find out? I asked her while she kept speaking fast and low. The first thing they did when I started looking for accommodation was that they asked me about my job. I told them I came to introduce myself as administrative staff at the local hospital. And so I managed to get this little apartment rented. But despite having all my documents on this in order, the director of the hospital told me that it would take between 2 and 3 months for my work activation. Then I discovered that he uses those delays to harness profits for his own benefit, which is irrelevant to our mission. But you lose access to first-hand data from the hospital, I said, something worried. Could you make remote access to the hospital computer system? I asked him a stupid question that didn't require an answer. Yet he answered me enthusiastically. Yes, and it was lucky, because I managed to interfere with all the communications using the computer programs of the stealth interface of Mental and access all communications in real time or delayed without leaving a record. It's almost like monitoring the zombies with drones and screens while we drink a cup of tea. He said and typed on the system built into his SCAR. The screen of the old TV flashed and began to show images of different security cameras. NZ said and clarified, no zombies. Still. RHYNNA and I come from another world, and they're different realities. One, the one I know, where I grew up, an emerging reality of the ancient zombies disaster that ruined this world. RHYNNA and I educated ourselves with constructive values in a world poorer but harmonically more efficient and with clean technology. And in this other reality that is the past of our time of origin, another, this world devastating of refugees, hunger, brutality and corruption, we have the absolutely secret mission of observing and investigating the origins of the zombie cataclysm. The historical record is very incomplete, and we had to prepare from the remnants of knowledge found between ruins, pieces of rotten books and fragments of recordings, and the incomparable help of mental, the self-evolving artificial intelligence that survived alone in a laboratory abandoned during the cataclysm with a minimum of solar panels to feed itself. Mental developed the time displacement device from trans-paradigmatic mathematical and technical concepts, consisting of zero-point energy inductions and warp modulation. In their first incursion with a team of the Vigilants, of a previous generation, they arrived in the middle of the zombie cataclysm, and even when everything went well for them, they failed to find out the origin of the outbreaks of the infections. And here we are, RHYNNA and I, in the village of the danger, 350 years ago, near a refugee camp and close to the border with a country that seems to be owned by a group of sadistic psychopaths who hold absolute power over things and people without distinction, and on this side of the boundary, RHYNNA and I land in the middle of an environment that appears to be in a penumbra of corruption and resigned indolence. RHYNNA and I are not the only ones, and even though we don't get in touch with the other watchmen, except in case of extreme need, we know that there are projects for places and moments in the big cities and in different places like borders of autocratic countries and other areas where there were no survivors, no known historical record. We were going for the second cup of wild mint tea, still sitting on the old sofa in his little apartment, when RHYNNA pointed me to the screen. One of the security cameras, intervened by the furtive systems developed by Mental, showed what I interpreted as a luxury vehicle of the most expensive, from which a man of ordinary appearance, common for the time, descended. Although slightly exceeded of weight for the standards of the 24, the man carried a bag, and entered outside of working hours in the shop of someone who turned out to be a very brave inhabitant, and then went out. Look at it carefully, said RHYNNA, that trade with its inflated prices doesn't sell a single potato, yet it continues with a high and expensive way of life, and the man of the pocket comes late at night, or very early in the morning, and always enters with some big pocket that does not carry when he leaves. It must be smuggling, I thought, and I said, I've seen that there's an enormous consumption of recreational drugs, and that there are people who just take it for granted, or they just find the mental disturbances that these things produce funny. No historical records had been found in our time of what happened here exactly, said RHYNNA. Trafficking in corrupt substances could be related, I began to say, feeling enlightened by an idea, and added, with large-scale infections in the first outbreaks, that's what I'm thinking now. Now, I said, we must establish basic hypotheses, and follow the action plan, according to the times of the infections and considering the data we have from the historical record, that the first cases begin at the end of this month. Yes, said RHYNNA, that was when the outbreaks of infection detonated in the big cities, but well, we can assume that in regions of these third world countries was the end. She asked herself and answered herself, okay, although in the public news she calls them emergents, and she continued, it is possible and most logical that the first cases have appeared and that they have not come to be recorded as such. That's the most reasonable thing, I replied, and we had already discussed it in the training talks with Mental, I told him. But Mental, RHYNNA rebatted me, it's still a trans-paradigmatic artificial intelligence and therefore with connotations that we can't imagine. Of course I had already fantasized with these possibilities when we were told of the device of time displacement, and that very well Mental could have made thousands of trips to other times or even just theoretical projects of such magnitude that they would be out of our reach. Internally, I had my ideas, and I shared them with RHYNNA. We might have been sent here to make changes even when we don't know, because whatever we do at this time will generate exponential changes. I finished. RHYNNA stared at me and began to smile. How did we not think of it before, he said, and continued, the people who had to take the job that I have and who would have rented this apartment are now elsewhere and that can change their chances of survival. RHYNNA's eyes seemed to grow in size when she said, we've already made the alteration. I'll find out who he is, who was at this time the candidate for your volunteer social worker in the refugee camp. And at RHYNNA's break I said to her, could we evaluate different petals of the flower of the facts, what do we find in the other stem of the pepper? That we would be in a zone of serious danger by occupying their original places. We're in danger, and it's better that we take precautions. At that moment we heard the sudden blast of a glass bottle, a shout of surprise from a woman and a choir of laughter. RHYNNA calmly told me that that was normal in the neighboring establishment, that of the red lights, there they used to get intoxicated intensely and do any nonsense for mere fun. Ah, of course, I said, it's one of those places where they exchanged paper notes for sex. So that was, give me money, said RHYNNA with a sensual tone in her voice. Cochin girl, I said to her, simulating a comedy rage, you've adapted quickly to these times and you've already become a piggy lady. Neither one, nor the other, but it could be, he said to me, scratching an eye and releasing a rope from his light clothes. I want to buy some refactions and others you can buy yourself at the machinery store. He typed on the scarring simulation in his forearm, where the integrated systems were hooked, telling me, here is the reference link, some basic plans and the list of components, then mark me what you find in the machining store and the rest we get it by home delivery. I received the specifications with a touch on my forearm, and when I looked at them I said, wouldn't we use weapons? And much less of our time. That was a recommendation, a non-binding choice. Except to kill humans or anything that's alive. But it doesn't apply to zombies if they're going to try to bite my sweet and delicious and beautiful ass, said RHYNNA with gentle sensuality. RHYNNA got up and walked toward a small refrigerator, also of old-fashioned model like almost everything in that apartment, and pulled out something that well I knew from the 24. A pizza. A few minutes in the stove and we'll have dinner, he said with the natural nature of the old times, of the future. Then he gave me another nice surprise by bringing 2 cups and a bottle of a whitish liquid. Don't tell me that's... I began to say, but he went on to clarify to me, no, it is not the potato distillate of La Rosabuena or of the Silis Hills of our time, and there is no time to prepare it here, this is sake of Japanese origin, it's not the same. But it seems to him, although it has a high level of alcohol and it is preferable to convey it with water for us, we are on a mission. He said, smiling and holding the cup on his lips. The pizza was delicious, made in the style of Silis Hills, with potato flour, peppers and natural tomatoes. I couldn't help saying that it was my best dinner in almost 350 years. And the dessert under red lights was sweet and delicious, extensive and explosive. At best in much more than 350 years. When he woke up, with his legs and braces intertwined with those of RHYNNA, he remembered fugitively having dreamed that he was running naked in a stormy night, and the dream was dimmed as he saw RHYNNA coming out of the shower exhibiting her stylized musculature under all her sweet, delicious, and beautiful skin. "A cup of tea and we start the day," he said gladly, very gladly. "I also slept wonderfully," I said and clarified, "Good morning, Miss RHYNNA." "Good morning, Mr. Vigilante," he replied. "If you go through the ferretery before you go to the refugee camp, you send me the list of items you get there and the rest I'll charge them for home delivery, and you get more money for me." Except for her eyes and her cheerful smile, her talk only of practical topics, gave me to interpret that she was really concerned about our personal safety. I passed through the mill. They only dumped low-capacity transducers and capacitors and the coils were very heavy. I ordered a quantity of everything available and paid to remove it later. When the employee asked me what I was going to do with all that, I replied that it was to build a small Tesla tower to light lamps and light by induction because the cables were always stolen. The employee seemed to have no idea who Tesla might have been, but if he understood what to steal. On leaving, I spent a few seconds with my scar, sent the data to RHYNNA and continued walking towards the refugee camp. I stopped to buy a pen and I was prepared to purchase a cell phone when John Bai's car stopped in front of me. "Let's go," he said in a pretty laughing. I got into the vehicle. I'd already figured out that it was a Chibi 1970 with an 8-cylinder engine, and that it had been your childhood dream. "I met you by Purita Casual," he said to me, and that he had carried in his montura, which was how he referred to the vehicle. Because there had been an emergency and they had taken emergency to some doctors, and there I assumed that he tried to say paramedics, because somebody had gone too far with the drug zombie.